What's going on, investors? In today's video, I'm going to be giving you my reaction to this CBS Evening News profile on how a landlord is actually about to go homeless because their tenants aren't paying rent. Now, normally if your tenant's not paying rent, you can file an eviction process, but because of the pandemic, there are a lot of moratoriums in place that prevent landlords from evicting tenants who have been impacted by COVID. Politicians and lawmakers have obviously enforced these moratoriums because they want to make sure that people who were impacted by COVID didn't become homeless. But now the opposite effect is coming to play, where landlords who spent their hard-earned money to buy these properties and to give people shelter aren't being paid. But meanwhile, they still have their own burdens that they have to pay. So for example, they still have to pay for their insurance, they have to pay for the property taxes, and they have to pay for their mortgages. Normally that income would come from the rental income from their tenants, but because the tenants are no longer paying, it's no longer the case. And some landlords, like the ones featured here in this video, aren't able to make those payments and are now going to lose their homes. So let's watch this video and let's see what happens.
This shocking number from the Treasury Department. Nearly 90% of the almost $50 billion allocated by Congress for rental assistance has not been distributed. Now that money is meant for landlords whose tenants have stopped paying rent and cannot be evicted during the pandemic. CBS's Mola Lenghi reports in depth on the consequences for landlords in America's eviction crisis.
So before we actually keep going forward, there were some laws enacted to help landlords who are in this exact situation. So if your tenant was impacted because of COVID and you're in a relatively low income area, then you as a landlord would get reimbursed some portion of your missing rents. So that's actually pretty nice of them. I think before there was not even a good discussion of repaying landlords who lost income because of these eviction moratoriums. But as we can see here, it's taking some time for those funds to be distributed. So some landlords haven't got their money yet, but they still have all of their obligations that they need to pay.
Randy Lacasse has been waiting on rent for nearly a year.
I've cried many nights, like thinking, where's my money?
Lacasse owns 3 properties in upstate New York, but the single mother and Air Force veteran is functionally homeless after falling on some hard times. Lacasse says after notifying tenants they had to move out so she could move in, they simply stopped paying and stayed put. She and her daughter have been living out of her car and staying with friends. Despite more than $23,000 in unpaid rent, Lacasse can't force her tenants out because of state and federal moratoriums on evictions.
I don't understand how they can give my private property to somebody to live for free. I bought that property, I fixed it up with my blood, sweat, and tears.
The policies were meant to protect vulnerable renters during the pandemic, but some property owners say they have become collateral damage.
One thing that's very clear is we have no housing safety net.
Vincent Reyna, a housing policy expert and professor at the University of Pennsylvania, co-authored a new report showing that nearly 10% of landlords around the country collected less than half of their rent in 2020. Small landlords owning fewer than 6 units were most affected.
We're forcing
So it seems like the mom and pop investors are the ones who are most affected by these eviction moratoriums. They're also more likely to have less liquid capital. So imagine if you're a large multifamily operator, you probably have a lot of cash reserves, whereas the mom and pop investor might have 1 or 2 or 3 rental properties and they're banking on that for their retirement. They might not have as much cash reserves as a larger multifamily corporation. So as you can see, when eviction moratoriums happen, and if you have 1, 2, or 3 of your properties who have tenants that are not paying rent, you can tell that you're going to be very, very impacted by this. And so now we have a fallout of landlords who are being taken advantage of by their tenants who just are kind of gaming the system and not paying rent.
income households and owners to essentially bear the cost of that in this current moment. And that's unfair to both parties.
I feel bad that I have not been able to pay her.
Carla MacArthur is Lacasse's tenant. With childcare costs for her daughter and an autistic son, she says she can't pay rent.
We've gone from 2 incomes. I have had COVID-19 twice. My kids all have had it once. My husband's had it once. We've been affected by the virus.
MacArthur has been approved for rent relief in New York, but the state hasn't paid Lacasse yet. So far, New York has sent about 8% of its federal allotment of $2.6 billion relief dollars directly to landlords.
I'm not sure what she may do when the moratorium's lifted. That's what I'm afraid of, being homeless. 2
families trying to avoid the same fate.
I invested in these properties never thinking I wouldn't have a place to live.
On opposite.
That's kind of scary to think about. Like, she owns multiple properties and isn't even able to live in one of them because of these moratoriums. And the crazy thing is, rent is, a few $1,000s per month. as every month goes by that you don't pay, that's even more that grows and grows and grows. So then often you have a situation where a landlord like her might be owed $70,000 because she hasn't been paid in a year and she has multiple properties. And the sad thing is, once the moratoriums end, it's not like those tenants are suddenly going to have all that money to repay her for all that lost rent. There's a good chance that she will never see that money, and she really is just banking on that reimbursement program to cover some of her lost money. In the meantime, I gotta say, this is like a super sad story of a landlord who invested her funds thinking she would get that passive income stream, and now she's facing homelessness herself.
Crisis.
I just want my house. That's it. I wouldn't have a place to live.
On opposite sides of a looming crisis.
I just want my house. That's it. I just want my house.
Mola Lengi, CBS News, New York.
So this is a risk that you have when you're investing in real estate. Unlike stocks, bonds, or cryptocurrencies, with real estate, you're often dealing with people. You're dealing with tenants who are using your property as a place to live. So if something goes wrong, sometimes it's not just about the numbers, right? These are people's livelihoods. They're probably going to fight to stay in their homes because they're raising their kids there. They have a family there. And that's why you have to be careful with where you invest. So if you're investing in a more affluent neighborhood, maybe your initial cash on cash return numbers don't look as great. But when you have a situation like this, there's a good chance that your tenants will continue paying rent, even through a pandemic. If you're investing in some more blue collar neighborhoods, then your initial cash on cash return might be higher. But when there's an economic crisis and people in that category get laid off, they might find it harder to get back on the work, right? They might be living paycheck to paycheck and they won't have enough reserves to continue paying rent once they lose a job or two. So these are a lot of factors that you need to consider when investing in real estate. So understand that yes, you can make a lot of money, but be careful where you invest and also make sure you're covered. So in case something like this happens, you personally have enough resources to sustain yourself. And that's why I always recommend that you have 6 months of holding costs for all of your properties in cash. So holding costs are your principal and interest payments for your mortgage, your insurance payments, and your taxes. It's called your PITI. And if you can have 6 months of PITI for all of your properties in a cash reserve somewhere where you don't touch, then in the worst case scenario, if all of your tenants stop paying rent and you lose your job, you're still gonna make your monthly payments for at least 6 months before you're in any more real trouble. So hope you guys all enjoyed this video. If you did, please smash the like button to let YouTube know that you guys enjoy videos just like this one. And let me know down in the comment section what you think about this situation. I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear what you think landlords should be doing to prevent themselves from being in a situation just like this. Thanks for watching, you guys. Again, my name is Sean, and I'll see you next time. Take care.